Last year I reviewed one of the most unusual lenses Viltrox has ever made, a 35mm f1.2, but the first two copies that they sent me were defective. The third copy was excellent, and now 11 months later they are quietly releasing a new version of this same lens, same optics, same price, but they removed the screen, replaced the aperture ring with a proper one, and somehow they sponsored this video even after my first review documented those early quality control problems, which means they are either very confident in this version or perhaps the original release happened just a little bit too early, or maybe it's both. So today I want to find out, is this the version that they meant to release all along? A 35mm f1.2 autofocus full frame lens for under $1,000 still is unusual. Sony does not make one, Canon does not make one, Sigma and Nikon do, but they're a lot more expensive than this one, and that's what made this interesting. It wasn't just that it was f1.2, but it was that it brought this kind of aperture into a much more accessible price range. So here is the headline with this new version. The optics are identical, same rendering, same sharpness, same minimum focus, same overall performance, but the body has changed in two important ways. First, the screen is completely gone. Second, the control ring is now a proper aperture ring, and both of these changes matter a lot. On the original version, the screen was a defining feature of this lens. It was cool, it showed the aperture, it showed focus distance. It was a cool and futuristic thing to have a screen on your lens, but in practice, it was a different story. Most times it felt unnecessary, and in fact, it slowed you down. The control ring would rotate indefinitely in either direction, with weird distances between the clicks that were not consistent, and then you'd accidentally touch it and it would move. It was just a bit unpredictable. The new N model, which stands for non-display model, has a standard aperture ring with clicks or declicked. It's easier to use, faster, and minimizes mistakes. Maybe it doesn't look as futuristic, but it does win in practicality. The rest of the lens still feels like the same Lab Series build. It's all metal housing with a high-grade dust and drip resistant design. The front lens has a water repellent and anti-fouling coating, 77mm front filter thread, custom buttons on the barrel. It's still a large and heavy lens, although this one is about 10 grams lighter than the original version. Inside, it's the same 15 elements in 10 groups and 4 Hyper VCM motors, which is the best autofocus linear motor that Viltrox makes. So let's talk about performance as I show you some sample photos just as a reminder of what this lens is capable of. And with these, I wanted to shoot night, so if you can't tell, all of these images are taken after about 8 p.m. and there's something slightly unnatural about a 35mm lens at f1.2. In some situations, it almost looks like a composite image or fake background blur because your brain isn't used to seeing this much separation from a relatively wide focal length. And these images, even coming out of my 6-year-old A7C, really do look amazing. The 35mm focal length should not produce bokeh balls this big. It just completely blurs out so much more than a typical 1.8 35mm lens, but beyond that, in the center of the frame wide open, this lens is sharp. The corners aren't quite as sharp until about f2, f2.8 and beyond, but if you are shooting a subject in the middle of the frame like this, it's spectacular. Contrast levels are strong, the rendering looks clean, but it's that bokeh and the ability to shoot with near night vision levels of brightness. It's one of those lenses that lets you see in the dark, and even in the daytime it works amazingly well. Distortion is very well controlled. There is a slight mustache line that you can't notice very easily. It's so slight that I don't think most people will even think about correcting it. Flare performance is pretty good. It's not top of the class levels of performance, but pretty solid for being such a fast prime lens. Chromatic aberration control is excellent. There is some longitudinal chromatic aberration that you do notice on out of focus high contrast areas. Again, that's called loca. And optically, I would say it performs just like the original. And that means, unfortunately, the focus breathing is still pretty strong for video. What I will say is that the autofocus with this version seems to be a little bit more confident. Maybe it's a bit faster as well. It's not a lightning fast focusing lens. It has quite heavy glass elements that probably just take a little bit longer to move around, I think. But it was great for the portraits and the video that I shot. No issues with it whatsoever. So there are three things I want to talk about first. The first thing is why f1.2. I don't think anyone buys an f1.2 lens for the test chart performance. You buy it because the images shot at f1.2 have a look that's difficult to fake. At 35mm especially, the amount of subject separation almost feels wrong sometimes. Your brain expects a wider focal length to show more depth and context, but this lens just melts backgrounds away. And in low light, it gives you this near night vision ability where the scenes that look almost too dark to your eyes suddenly become bright and cinematic through your camera, which is pretty fun to use out in the wild. Second, the screen removal. I think this was a very smart move. When the original version of this lens came out, and I think it was a 16mm that came out first with that screen on top, I was so excited about it. You could have what only Zeiss Batis owners could have for a fraction of the price. It was cool, but the control ring and the uneven clicks just didn't work in the real world. It was a distraction and a hindrance, I would say, more so than an asset. This is a simpler, more intentional, better tool. It makes for a better shooting experience. It might not look as cool to strangers and bystanders, but I think practicality wins. Third, let's discuss the competition. There's not much out there that is a 35mm lens at f1.2. So you might find yourself looking at other lenses that are f1.4 and throwing those into the mix. And that's kind of tough because you could be in the camp that you know you need, or at least you want f1.2, and that's exactly what this lens is about. It's getting you access to that super fast aperture at the lowest cost possible, and there are others of you that might be thinking, will I notice much of a difference between f1.2 and f1.4? And at about 10 feet to your subject, it's the difference between 8 inches of focal depth versus roughly 10 inches of focal depth. That extra bokeh and subject separation creates a certain pop in your images that some may notice and others may not. I think if you are comparing this lens to the Sony 35mm f1.8 GM or even the better new Sigma 35 f1.4 DG2, it's a tough decision because the price is so close. With the Sony, you're about $500 away, but you're only about $50 away from the even better Sigma. But again, that's not really the competition because there are a lot more 35mm f1.4 lenses out there, and the size difference between an f1.4 and an f1.2 is very significant. So the real competition is from something like the Sigma 35mm f1.2 DG2 Art, which is a brilliant lens, absolutely amazing. However, it is $550 US more than this Viltrox, and in my mind, there isn't enough optical difference to pay the additional 50% towards the Sigma, even if it was, let's say, 10% sharper optically and had less vignetting, which I don't believe it is or does have. I still wouldn't think that the extra sticker price would be worth it. And if you compare it to other manufacturers out there, let's say Nikon's version, that thing is $2,600 US. And that's where Viltrox wins with these lenses. They have consistently stepped up optically. Even after just a few years, they are now rivaling some of the best made in Japan high-end competitors, and they are doing it at much more affordable prices. And because Viltrox frequently runs sales on these lenses, the value proposition gets even stronger. I think right now, if you want top-of-the-line optical performance on a budget, Viltrox is the brand that you need to pay the most attention to. What they are doing with their lines really is brilliant, and they are dominating the APS-C lens space as well. So kudos to them. Keep it up. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Is the f1.2 a big enough difference compared to f1.4 on a 35mm lens? If you are interested in checking out this lens and seeing just how much of a deal you can get on it, I will link that down below. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more and have a nice day. Bye-bye.